Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, November 20th, 2023. Time for yet another show, though I just realized one of the things I didn't do was do my awesome test of Skype this morning. So, I don't know whether we should just cross our fingers and hope it works. I think that'll probably do. And if not, we'll fix it within a few seconds. But usually, even on days when I neglect to do the test, it works just fine when it starts up, but it always helps to have the test under your belt. And worst thing that can happen is it delays our connection with Greg Dworkin for a minute or so. And those are critical minutes, but, and we got to get all our work in, of course, early in the week, because it is Thanksgiving week. And it is the most clock-watchingest week of the calendar. And largely because, as I mentioned in the Morning Post, and as you know very well from your own experience, Thanksgiving has, of course, it has crept long ago into absorbing Friday into the calendar, and nobody wants to return to work for the Friday following Thanksgiving. And, of course, you're supposed to either go do manic shopping or stay at home and be thankful that you're not doing manic shopping. I'm not certain where we fall in all of this. But, of course, then later on, the Wednesday of the week was absorbed as a travel day, and everyone was granted Wednesdays off as well. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday now mostly, for the most part, office workers anyway, find that their place of employment is closed. All the rest of us who may have to, make sandwiches for or clean up around people who have off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, mostly still on. But some getting holiday pay for that as well, not to mention all of our martyrs in retail who not only don't get Friday off, but have maybe the worst day of their life on Friday and have to go serve the rest of us going crazy, or make enough sales to make up for the people who are hiding in their houses. Anyway, then as has happened, of course, Wednesday has become the most insane travel day of the year, and most people absorbing that lesson then begin leaving on Tuesday, which means that the higher-ups in the office are taking off on Tuesday, leaving the rest of us around to hold down the fort until close of business Tuesday, and then not perhaps coming in on Wednesday, although I'm sure they now ask around, are you traveling for Thanksgiving? If you're not, if you're staying local, maybe you want to come in and hold down the fort on Wednesday. But the fact that things have expanded into Tuesday now also means that Monday is kind of watch the clock day, or for some people who are conscientious about this, another manic day where they're running around like crazy trying to get a week's worth of work done in a day and a half. On the other hand, you could be hosting a radio show where no work is ever done and no one ever, it's hard enough all by itself, of course. But, I got to start thinking about how we're going to, I don't know. It's up to me. I have no boss to tell me which one you're going to do, except, of course, for you, the listeners, who may or may not demand performance on Thursday or Wednesday. Okay, here we go. Oh, it's another one of those days where things aren't going to work right. I can see that Greg is ringing in, and I'll tell you what. Maybe what we'll do is I could call him, but he's ringing, and all right, just goes to show you can't slack on the preparation. All right, maybe I'll call him and see if that works. Sometimes it works that way. All right, well, now I'll call him. He'll call me. We'll both call at the same time, and it all works out.
I'll have my people call your people.
Yes, that's
really
it.
What'll happen.
Right. I guess I always wondered what happened when that went on, because I never had people, and no people ever seemed to call me either, by the way, except just the people I was regularly trying to call. And those are, those aren't people. They're just the regular people that I'm talking to.
Okay.
You see what I mean? And nobody's people ever call me. It's
well,
just
I'll
the
have
people.
to process this, as I told Justice Putnam this morning when he said you were live.
I was?
I said, you're live.
Yeah.
I am an OpenAI clone. I happen to be working for Microsoft now.
I think, unless you're fired. I don't know what the story is. That's definitely a story I haven't followed, but somebody got fired, and I don't know if I'm...
OpenAI fired me, and then Microsoft hired me to run the company.
Yeah, perfect, right. And then Google bought it, or I don't know what.
Google
that's
bought
a
it,
mystery
sold it to Apple, and the next thing you know, I'm president of Argentina.
Now, that I found out about just recently. I think we should make them all January 6th defendants, and then I would pay more attention to them. And in some world, it's very possible that this new president of Argentina was there on January 6th. We don't know. He's a Donald Trump-ish weirdo, and I guess now the thing is to have weird hair.
He's sort of a rare obvious. He's singular.
Okay,
he's not really a Donald Trump clone.
Fair.
He's a Elon Musk on steroids. If Elon Musk had a psychotic break.
Well, he's an oddball.
I sent you some great pictures. First of all,
to be sure, okay,
I sent you a picture and a video.
All right,
of him dressed up as a superhero cartoon character.
Napoleon.
No.
He looks like him.
Actually, when I put the picture on Daily Kos this morning on the roundup, somebody said, "Hey, he looks like Loci." I think we elected Loci as president.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I see what you mean. He's sort of, I don't know if he is a identifiable hero, or that's just...
Well, that's his alter ego. And he actually has a song about it at the very, very end.
Obviously.
I have that song there so you could hear him singing. Not that important. The better one I have is way up above, where underneath that picture of him dressed as a cartoon character.
Yeah.
I have a tape of him describing his economic plan. Now, you have to remember about Argentina a couple of things. First of all, they have 200% inflation.
Oh.
Secondly, he was running against the economics minister.
All right. Well, that's not...
If there was anything close to a sure win, this was it.
I guess so.
In fact, if Joe Manchin wanted to run, he should have run for president of Argentina because he hates losing, and this would be a guaranteed win. Much easier than, say, winning a senator from West Virginia.
Yeah. Where's Harold Ford at the moment?
Yeah,
I
pretty
guess
much.
He's got time now. Okay.
But this rant, this video, it's 44 seconds long. I don't know if you want to play it. But basically what it is to set it up is him standing at a whiteboard. And these little magnetic names of the different departments in the Argentinian government are plastered on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And he rips off each one and yells, "Out!"
Okay. Is it
Ministry
in
of
Spanish?
Defense, out. Ministry of Education, that's indoctrination, out.
Oh, is it?
It's just amazing.
Okay, well, we can play it to get a sense of the enthusiasm, I suppose. Is it in Spanish? Let's see.
Yeah, but
that's okay.
It conveys everything you need to know anyway.
All right, let me see if we can. Oh boy! All right, hold on a minute. Elon has put some things in the way here. All right, let's see. Oh, here we go.
Ministerio de Cultura, afuera.
Afuera. Okay,
Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera.
Well, he got excited about that one. All right, there's still a little bit of time to go, but yeah.
No, he just starts screaming more and more.
Oh, okay. Oh, excellent. We'll just...
Guitarristas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación, afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación,
David did not speak.
Adoctrinamiento, afuera. Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, afuera. Se acabó el curro de la política.
The thievery of politics is over. Long live damn liberty. And then Yankee and Silverland. That's his title page there. Okay.
So, it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
And for those interested, over at Daily Kos, I actually posted a couple of who is this guy? What's going on here? Pieces. One is from America's Quarterly by Nick Burns. It's called Javier Milei's Unexpected Rise.
Yes.
And the other is from the Buenos Aires Herald, for those of you who want to dig into the weeds there. It's a guide to Argentina's coalitions.
Okay.
What I mean by that is when you run in Argentina, There's like 172 parties.
And 200% inflation.
It's not one party against another party. It's one coalition against another coalition.
Interesting.
And they have this really charming habit of renaming the coalitions if they lose, so that you don't have the stench of loss associated with you for when you reconvene and then run the next time.
Yes.
So they're always changing their names, so you have no idea who they are.
Continental Airlines Coalition. Back if you're really an old-time air traveler.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Union por la Patria, which is the Union for the Homeland, was the governing party.
Yeah.
And they were running against various other coalitions. The main one that they were running against is Juntos por el Cambio, Together for Change. And that was at least 5 different parties, and both of them lost to this newcomer who basically came up and said, I know it's terrible here. I'm tearing everything up. I hate everything that the Peronistas stand for, and also everything that the center-right coalition stands for. So you're all out, I'm in, and I'll shake things up and fix things.
Okay.
And
good for
with
you.
no experience and with no plan, good luck, Argentina.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what can I tell you? I mean, this is happening over and over in various countries. It's just a super popular thing to do, to run as this sort of weird right-wing populist authoritarian wackadoodle. I want to note for the record that the Yankee and Silverland title page that he has here, he's clearly had someone, throw together some photoshopping stuff. He's got a picture of himself, not looking particularly great, but that's his look. And he's put the sort of
he
like
prides himself on never having combed his hair ever, in his life.
Well, that's an accomplishment. Okay, well, it's a thing, and he has put on his over his eyes the sort of internet meme low-res sunglasses that we frequently see in various memes. You
mean like memes. Cyclops X-Men?
No,
beams coming out of his eyes?
No. The sort of the deal with it meme sunglasses, just like a pair of crudely drawn Ray-Bans. Yeah, and then but. I guess, I don't know whether this is a new thing to his profile because he just won. That's the more innocent explanation for it. But he's got a set of golden laurels, I guess, around himself that are not exactly the same, but very reminiscent of the Fred Perry logo favored by the Proud Boys. The golden laurel leaves around him is his picture here. I see that it's a slightly different rendering of it, so they're not lifted directly from I don't know if that's an effort to avoid a copyright issue or trademark issue, or just that's the only one that he could find of a good size, or whether he knows nothing about the Proud Boys and has no association with them whatsoever. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, other things, of course, are happening. We need to acknowledge the passing of Rosalind Carter.
Right.
96 years old. I looked to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and other people to really cover that. And I heard some great vignettes about her. One of them, of course, was her saying to someone about Ronald Reagan after they lost the election.
Yes.
That the thing about Reagan is that he, allows everybody to act out on their prejudices.
Yeah, I thought that was really something, that he makes them feel comfortable in their prejudices. That was that was a remarkable insight.
And it was remarkable insight. The other remarkable insight she had was just a couple of years ago.
I knew it, but
when she was in her 90s, and they had this blowout birthday party for her.
Oh.
And tons of people showed up. And somebody asked her if she was flattered, and she shrugged and said, "They're here for him."
Wow. Well,
which is true. I mean, he was spending the entire time hugging everybody and shaking hands. He's a politician. They all knew him, and he knew them.
Yeah. Well,
and
she became beloved in her own.
And she was honest about it.
Yeah. Well, okay. Remarkable people and remarkable insight in that. I just thought it was a pithy way of putting it. The Ronald Reagan thing really summed it up in a sentence, and that's hard to do.
As Mark Jacob, the ex-Chicago Tribune editor, said, the Washington Post, of course, blew their headline. With Rosalind's passing, Jimmy Carter faces life alone. He's got 4 children, 11 grandchildren, 14 great-children, grandchildren, millions of admirers.
Yeah, you heard about
He's
the party.
not alone.
Yeah.
He's without Rosalind. That's a big deal. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But
yeah.
he's not alone.
Yeah. And he would probably tell you so if he felt like talking to you right now, which, maybe not. But, okay, that's odd to jump in that direction. But,
hey,
it happens.
Right. Let's see. What else can we talk about? There's a lot to talk about. I don't know if you want to go directly to the court stuff because there's a ton of court stuff.
By all means.
By all means. Okay. Well, let's see. Why don't we start with the court stuff with Joyce Vance, because Joyce Vance just has this lovely summary of what's going on here for the week.
All right. Let's get there.
Monday morning. That's today. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia will hear argument in Donald Trump's challenge to the gag order Judge Chutkan imposed in the election interference case. That's to be distinct and different from the gag order that was placed in New York for his civil trial.
Yes, which was temporarily lifted, I understand.
That was lifted because the appellate judge who heard that said, free speech, I don't like it, and that'll probably be appealed too. But with this one,
all right.
The appellate judges who are hearing the gag order that Chutkan had in place temporarily lifted until this hearing, but this hearing is today.
That's pretty temporary.
Trump's brief to the court argued the Biden administration was attempting to silence its most prominent political foe. No court in America has imposed a gag order on a criminal defendant who's actively campaigning for public office, let alone a leading candidate for president in the United States, as lawyers wrote. Of course, they ignore the fact that the judge has life tenure and is part of a separate branch of government, and he doesn't work for Biden, and he doesn't take orders from him. And while they're correct that this is the first time a presidential candidate has been subjected to a gag order, they neglected to acknowledge that Trump is the first presidential candidate to be under indictment 4 times over. While campaigning.
It's implicit.
As well as one is uniquely prone to inciting violence with his careless words.
Right. This is the first time that a defendant on trial for murdering this particular victim has ever been silenced.
I hate to bring this up. I mean, I really do. I hate it. But you have to.
Okay. I don't know.
The panel judges are...
Yes.
Somebody who was appointed by Barack Obama, somebody who was appointed by Barack Obama, and somebody who was appointed by Biden. That's the 3-judge panel.
That sounds all right.
So it does sound all right.
Yeah, I know. We hate to. This is a modern journalistic practice that has sort of
in the old days, you didn't
even
have to mention this. It wasn't important. Now it's important.
It was in fact in the old days. It was important not to say it. Really, no, we don't acknowledge that as a thing. So. I don't know whether it's good or bad. It's certainly a bad trend that people always feel like they have to ask. But,
but that's not the only Judge Chutkan action this week.
Yeah.
The day before Thanksgiving, which you pointed out, is sort of a holiday in its own right because, creeping socialism or something.
Yes, right.
Personally, I think you should take all of November off, but then again, I'm retired, so I do take all of November off.
Oh.
The day before Thanksgiving
that's a good idea.
Is a big day for Trump's lawyers. It's their deadline for replying to Jack Smith's response to their motions to dismiss the case. Trump's lawyers asked for a longer delay from their original deadline last week. Judge Chutkan gave them until Wednesday. So we looked at that.
Yeah.
If Trump prevails in any of the motions, the case against him would be dismissed. He's got a bunch of bizarre reasons for thinking like you shouldn't ever try me. Like double jeopardy, they already tried me in the Senate and I won. Like, I'm the president and you can't because anything I do, if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Right. The guy in Argentina
he's got a bunch of stuff.
Won, so you can't do this to me.
If any of these motions prevails, the case against them would be dismissed. None of them seem to rise to that level. Judge Chutkan is likely to rule promptly once this last set of briefs is in order to speed the appeal of the issues, so that they can then not delay the trial too much.
Well, show me in the Constitution where it says you can't be put in triple jeopardy.
This is the trial that's most likely to happen before the election. The others are subject to delay.
Right. And there's a new delay afoot in Florida with Eileen Cannon as well, I understand.
Yeah, and that'll probably succeed because she wants it to, and there's not much you can do about it because judges have leeway or something or other.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, he'll be found innocent.
No, and you never will be, because they hammer this into your. You're never found innocent. You're found not guilty.
No, I'm not even sure they'll find that.
I don't think he could find his own head.
He's certainly not innocent.
Yeah. All right. Right. That's true. Though he probably has combed his hair. Mm-hmm. Or whatever that thing is.
Right. So next, the Colorado case is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I was just absolutely fascinated by this.
In
Colorado.
What case are you talking about?
People brought up 14th Amendment, Section 3.
Yes.
As per Judge Ludick and Lawrence Tribe, and said Trump is disqualified from running for office because he participated in an insurrection.
He did.
And so you can't allow him to have federal office.
Right.
And the judge did two things. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so you'll have to correct me on this when I get it wrong.
If you found it fascinating, I think you're on the right track.
But the judge
looked
at this in two ways. A fact-finding part of it, which is very difficult for appeal courts to overturn. They don't do fact-finding. They don't interview witnesses. She found, as a matter of fact, he participated in an insurrection. So it's therefore established as a legal fact that he's an insurrectionist. And then she said, but as a matter of law, the way I read this particular 14th Amendment Section 3 piece of
garbage,
piece of law, he's not disqualified from running for office because it didn't specifically say the president.
Yeah.
And if you look at the wording closely, the oath of office that everybody else takes is different than the oath of office he takes. Now, if that sounds like sophistry, it is, but who cares?
Well,
say that.
Okay.
The important thing is that the fact-finding in the case was an insurrectionist. The appeals courts are not going to address that. It's simply a matter of fact now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Whatever she ruled on in her decision about what the law says was going to be appealed.
Right.
Her opinion has no sway whatsoever with the people above her who will review it.
Mm-hmm.
So from a layman's point of view, what difference does it make what she decided on that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that she decided he's an insurrectionist. Now the courts will have to decide what to do with it. So she basically punted that up and said, it's not my pay grade to decide this. It's a really big, super big question, which probably the Supreme Court will decide. I'm not dealing with it. You deal with it. And I have no problem with that.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, if you're going to come to the conclusion, or even if you don't really have a conclusion, but you decide this really feels like the sort of thing that a district court judge, even a federal judge, but in a district court should not be deciding. And that this is either a political question, as they decided in Minnesota, Michigan, maybe both.
One of those M states.
Yeah, right. Montana, Manhattan, which is totally a state.
Yeah, Massapequa.
Yeah. Massanutten Ski
Resort. Massapequa court should really not decide this.
No.
Okay, that's a reasonable argument.
Yeah, I know. We have a production assistant in this house from Massapequa, so that makes tremendous amount of sense. So yeah, it's a very interesting decision, and I guess this is the best you can get. If you decide you're not going to just put yourself out there like what's his name, Matthew Kaczmarek or whatever his name is in Texas, where he and a couple other judges say, I absolutely should speak for the entire judiciary in the entire country from this little corner of nowhere. This judge, I can't make this decision, but I can hand you this momentous piece. Mm-hmm. He is an insurrectionist. Take that and do what you will with it. If the appeals court says, I disagree with your reading of the 14th Amendment, and I think it is applicable to presidents, and I have in front of me this finding of fact, which now compels me to disqualify him.
Right.
It is a pretty good setup if you're not going to pull the trigger on it.
Right. For somebody who's well aware of the political ramifications, this is a very clever way to deal with it.
Yeah.
And lawyers and judges are nothing if not clever.
They are sometimes nothing, as it turns out.
Well, if you're on Trump's team.
But yeah.
Anyway, so there's that case.
Okay.
Let's see. Judge Engoron in the New York Attorney General's fraud case, not to be confused with the criminal case for hush money, which hasn't even come up yet.
Oh, right.
Judge Engoron ruled against Trump on his motion for a mistrial without any briefing, saying the arguments were so speculative it'd be a waste of time. So he basically said to the Trump team, yeah, no.
All right. Well, it's a good way of saving time. You guys are frivolous.
Don't waste my time.
True. That's always what you're wishing for. Not all judges are willing to do it, but I mean, he's been sitting there for months on end listening to it, so he's in a good position to make that call, I think, at this point. And, And
then meanwhile, the gag order, as you pointed out, is going to be reviewed. Now, the judge who said, let's hold on the gag order for now is a free speech advocate.
Like Elon Musk.
But it'll be interesting that appeal process as that works its way through, if they, at state level, see what happens with Chutkin's gag order and how that's decided by the feds, and whether or not it doesn't have a direct effect, but, they read the papers like everybody else.
Right. It'd be an interesting thing. I wonder how much leeway they could. Well, it depends on who's doing the reviewing, of course, and I guess you could say, well, because we're not a federal court, our concerns are not the same. But right. I don't know.
In the Biden classified document, well, if you're talking about free speech is a federal issue.
Yeah.
And so if the feds decided this isn't free speech, this is intimidation, you can't do that. That may have some salience.
Well, that will help them, certainly, even on the federal level. All right.
And then, before the break, finally, the Biden classified document investigation is no more. They decided not to charge. There's nothing there.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But again, another example of how if you're insistent on, we're going to run this just like any other case and take our time, and the judicial system is honest, forthright, and thorough, if nothing else, that's how long it takes to decide that, no, there's no case here, and there never was. But now we can prove it to you with a large document. So, okay, we'll be right back after this well-documented break.
To be appealed. And therefore, I won't.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is The Appeal. The first segment of the show, of course, the trial segment of the show, we now arrive at the first level of appeals.
Well, you think you appeal to people?
We find that out at the end of the show. Segment 3 is where that one goes, and then they turn it off. The Supreme Court at the end turns off the show, and they decide whether they come back or not.
Yeah, all right. So Marcy Wheeler goes into depth about that Colorado ruling.
Okay.
And perhaps the most important thing isn't what she notes about it, which is the same thing we note about it. Yes. Only she did it first and better.
And 15 times.
It's her snippets of what the judge actually said, which I think are worth mentioning.
All right.
The court concludes, based on its findings of fact and the applicable law detailed above, that Trump incited an insurrection on January 6, 2021, therefore engaged in insurrection within the meaning of Section 3.
Okay.
Now, there, she doesn't say that, listen, I found that he incited an insurrection, not engaged in insurrection, because he didn't go to the Capitol, therefore he's innocent. She didn't say that.
Okay.
That's part of the Trumpist argument, by the way.
Yeah.
So she was okay with, a little wordplay there. Incited equal engaged for the purposes of this fact-finding.
That keeps open my favorite charge of insurrection.
Which?
The setting on foot, the old definition of actual insurrection, of whosoever incites or sets on foot an insurrection against the United States, which
march to the Capitol.
Yeah.
I'll be with you.
Yeah, that's like Civil War era.
There, you got it.
Verbiage, and then he actually says. So he could have been. I could have seen Trump and his lawyers leaning on it. I didn't tell him to march there. That's what set on foot means. I didn't actually say get in line and march. Except, I did.
But it's
almost as if he
how they got
set
there,
out
that's
to
obviously Lyft and Uber. It's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe public transport.
I really do think
it's the founder's fault.
Yeah, I do think that if they had arrived by motor vehicle, he would have said, "See, I didn't set them on foot, so I can't be charged." But he
one came by land and two came by sea. So what do you call that?
I call that taking over the airports and ramming the ramparts.
First, the court concludes that Trump acted with the specific intent to disrupt the Electoral College certification of President Biden's electoral victory through unlawful means.
Yeah, that's...
Specifically by using unlawful force and violence.
Okay.
That has ramifications with these gag orders we were talking about. Next, the court concludes that the language Trump employed was likely to produce such lawlessness. The court concludes that Trump acted with a specific intent to incite political violence and direct it at the Capitol. Now, that's pretty straightforward. Even a non-lawyer like me can understand what she's saying here.
Yeah. All right.
And then she goes out to say, his inaction during the violence and his later endorsement of the violence corroborates the evidence that his intent was to incite violence. The court therefore holds that the first Brandenburg factor has been established. Brandenburg factor. I hate when they make me go look up stuff.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to go to school and learn it first.
Yeah, well, I didn't, so there.
Well, I went and I didn't. So, okay. It's one of those cases that you go, oh, yeah. One of those big cases.
So, all right. Well, there must have been one of those Brandenburg v. somebody.
Yes, right.
Right?
Or v. them.
Wrote that.
Yeah.
A state may not forbid speech advocating the use of force or unlawful conduct unless this advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action, says Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969.
Yes, I think that's...
So that must be one of the Brandenburgs. I mean, there's 5 other concertos, so it may be that there's other things involved here. Including, a double violin concerto. But, for the most part, it satisfies Brandenburg because the advocacy was directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action. I think that's what the judge was saying.
Okay.
I am not a lawyer, so don't quote me on it.
Okay, I won't. Hey, look, the Brandenburg blimp. That's what you do when you're losing in the case.
Yeah, look, squirrel, right?
But, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I think
But that's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
That is like, okay, he's guilty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as Marcy points out, it's a preview of Trump's January 6th trial.
Yes. It's funny. I mean, it is really his January 6th trial. They're just saying it isn't because they're just testing parts of it in Colorado. They make these weapon systems. They build a part here, build a part there. So
now, you might remember one of the Trump lawyer team approaches to Chutkan's case.
Yes.
Which is Jack Smith trying Trump for the January 6th insurrection, was to try to ban the judge from including any reference to the mob and violence in the indictment, and so the jury shouldn't see it.
Oh.
And it shouldn't be part of the case. And Chutkan said, yeah, no, we're not doing that.
Okay.
And now you go back to this and you say, okay, well, fact-finding by the Minnesota court said, and this is federal court said, maybe it's a low-level court, but nonetheless, a federal court found, yeah, he's guilty of that, and it involved the mob.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you can bring that up because it seems important.
Right. Now, Wallace used, that's a judge in Minnesota. Is that where this was, Minnesota?
I don't know.
Colorado, sorry.
We're still on that. Okay, I thought we moved to the other. Yes, Colorado, right?
Once the judge dismissed Kash Patel and Katrina Pearson's claims that Trump intended to call the National Guard, she then used 3 things to show that Trump did intend to incite the mob, writes Morrissey. First, she relied heavily on the testimony of Chapman University professor Peter Simi, who described how Trump used the coded language of the far right to endorse violence. She mapped out what Trump added into his January 6th speech, and she talked about how Trump's later statements about Pence telling the mob he loved them ratified their violence, which Wallace used to distinguish Trump from others. As I've shown, Marcy, Trump has tried to simply wish away the role of the mob in his indictment, a wish that Tanya Chutkan has already rejected. Judge Wallace's opinion makes it clear
sort of central
that that's all Trump has.
Okay.
So the defense that Trump is going to try to offer is that the mob had nothing to do with anything I did on January 6th. I just made a speech.
Right.
Like all this other stuff that happened had nothing to do with me. And Wallace in Colorado, federal court, said, no, actually, you were at the pinnacle of this and you incited it.
Well, that's common sense view of it. I mean, he raised the crowd himself. Be there, will be wild.
I can't believe Jack Smith is going to try to make Trump the center. Well, yeah, he is, because he was.
That's the point.
Because he did.
Right.
And it's a matter of fact now.
Yeah. And another great illustration of the interplay between, well, I guess this isn't a state case. It's a federal case filed in Colorado.
Oh, you're trying to make a federal case out of this?
Is it a state? What court? Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, where were we? We were in federal district court in Colorado?
We're in federal, lowest court in Colorado. Yeah. So,
by the way, the section of code that I was referring to before, I know I saved this somewhere. 18 U.S. Code section 2383 regarding rebellion or insurrection, which, by the way, doesn't trace its provenance back to, maybe there was something that was based on that was earlier, but this is actually this section of code passed in 1948, where there was still, mechanized infantry, but still things were set on foot back in the day, even in 1948, and revised in 1994, and they didn't get rid of that archaic language. Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto. You don't even have to be there. And he definitely gave a lot of comfort to it, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. But, of course, she wanted to punt on that language. But now I'd be interested to compare 2383's use of the word office. I mean, this is a clearer view of it. Like in the 14th Amendment, it lists those things, and that was her excuse. No person shall be senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, versus holding any office under the United States. I don't know. Is that any different? I think largely her excuse leaned on, they started with the highest ranking office that they were willing to list, senator, and then went downward.
Well, she said, and by the way, I have to correct myself. She's a state judge, Colorado State Judge Sarah Wallace, Democratic appointee.
I thought that might be the case since it was a ballot access question.
Since it was ballot access in Colorado, that was the issue. She said maybe the founders made an error. They just screwed up because they forgot to include the president. That's not my problem. I have to work with the language.
Yes. Well, true. But, of course, the 14th Amendment was a Civil War era, so maybe the founders made a mistake by not taking care of it before they died. And
maybe the founders' children meant they needed to do something else.
But here in 1948,
this is
a
second foundation.
Guess so. But, yeah,
it comes after Foundation and Empire. So, we don't know. But she's dealing with some pretty complex issues. I just think she did a pretty good job in setting out what's important and then moving it along.
Yeah, and I guess the incentive to stay out of the federal question is twice as, as weighty for a state judge.
Yeah, it's interesting because other state judges are basically saying, I get the issue. I understand the situation. I don't want to deal with this. This is really complicated. He's got millions of voters.
Yeah. Interesting way to keep it alive. And I was going to say, when I thought she was a state judge first, and then we said, no, maybe she's federal. But I was going to say, as you had pointed out with Jack Smith's case and the way he focused, another interesting interplay between bringing state actions and federal actions both, and trying different approaches in different places.
We see it in New York. We see it in Georgia. We see it now in Colorado. They all read each other. The feds will have the final say on it because ultimately the Supreme Court will. But, they all are doing their job in different ways, and it takes a long time. So for those of you complaining, well, why didn't they do this right away? It takes time.
I did. There are certain actions that other countries have frequently taken in situations like that, and they do it immediately. And we're supposed to be the enlightened, city on a hill, of course. So it's problematic for us, but it does solve problems.
If we are truly a country of laws and we work under the rule of law, then, you got to wait for these things to become ripe, as they like to say. And you have to let them work their way through the lower courts before they get to the upper courts. And sometimes that means the state courts before they get to the federal courts.
We're taking a year to decide that, hey, Joe Biden didn't have any documents like we told you. And now
Well, apparently, and again, I'm no expert on this, but apparently all of these judges also have other things to do, like there's other criming and there's other things they have to decide and other questions they have. And that's why judges like Judge Aileen Cannon have so much leeway in determining their schedule.
Yes. Not that there's anything going to her courthouse by design, but, okay. It could happen, and that's the important part.
Right. So I mentioned that, the title of today's Pundit Roundup was Polling Discovers That the Election is Still a Year Away.
Right.
And the reason I did that is because after the New York Times Siena poll last year showing Trump beating Biden, then this weekend had the NBC poll saying Biden's standing hits new lows amid Israel-Hamas war. Young voters are breaking from Biden if you believe these polls. And if you believe these polls, it's going to be the subject of my next piece here. Helping give Trump a narrow lead for the first time, although within the margin of error. So if somebody's leading by 2 points but within the margin of error, and now they're trailing by 2 points but within the margin of error, it's within the margin of error, and basically that's not a change at all.
That's true.
But that's besides the point. The point here is, first of all, if you're going to look at a good poll like NBC, they're very accurate a week before the election. They start getting accurate about 3 months before the election. They're pretty bad a year out. Everybody knows that, but they do this anyway.
They're warming up.
That's sort of known. There's nothing new about that. You've heard it said like after every poll that comes out these days, so that's not new. What is new is a fascinating look by Nate Cohn from the New York Times, who of course has the New York Times Siena poll, about not horse race polling. We know the issues with the horse race polling, and basically it's when you do it.
Okay.
Also, differential non-response, who winds up answering the polls, if you're disaffected, do you really, and such things. But he brings up there's a bigger crisis in polling, and it's not horse race polling. We know it gets to be accurate as we get closer. Our poll is pretty accurate. It's a point off one way or the other. That's all right. Mm-hmm. The crisis is in issue polling. Usually we look at it and say, we really need to know about issues. And so if, for example, abortion rights are popular 65-35 in Ohio, that tells us a whole lot more than how are people going to vote on issue one. We just want to get a sense of where people are at and what they feel. And issue polling is how we get there. And so isn't it great that everybody does that kind of polling? And Nate Cohn says, we got a problem here.
Uh-oh. I mean, all right.
He says, look, by the usual measures, last year's midterm polls were among the most accurate on record, but in harder to measure ways, there's a case these polls were really bad, extraordinarily bad, he writes.
Oh.
Poll after poll seemed to tell a clear story before the election. This was 2022. Remember? Red wave?
I don't remember.
Voters were driven more by the economy, immigration, and crime than abortion and democracy, helping to raise the specter of a red wave.
Or so they thought.
In the end, the final results looked just like about what the final polls said.
Oh.
So didn't we do a good job? No, we did not do a good job. They told a completely different story about the election. When abortion and democracy were at stake, Democrats excelled. This is so important when we're looking at what happens a year from now. And while the polls had sometimes or even often showed Democrats excelling, they almost always failed to convincingly explain why, making it seem that Democratic polling leads were fragile and tenuous.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I remember this.
I am reminded of when Terry McAuliffe, who, as you know, I don't think was a great candidate, trounced Ed Gillespie, even though Gillespie was ahead in the polls.
Yes. Okay.
It was fragile. It was tenuous. Yeah, he leads in the polls, but look, some other guy says he's catching up. Well, actually, he won more than the polls said. Oh, well, see, we told you that was going to happen. No, you didn't. Take our own Times Siena polls. Our results in states like Pennsylvania and Arizona were very close to the final results and showed Democrats with the lead. By all accounts, abortion and democracy were major factors helping to explain Democratic strength in these states, especially against election deniers like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, governor, and Kari Lake in Arizona, senator.
Yes.
But although these polls performed well, they didn't explain what happened. If anything, the polls were showing the conditions for a Republican win. They showed voters wanted Republican control of the Senate. They showed a majority of voters didn't really care whether a candidate thought Joe Biden won in 2020, even though election deniers wound up being clearly punished at the ballot box. In fact, they were trounced. Mm-hmm. Voters said they cared more about the economy than issues like abortion or democracy, and so on. In other words, that's not true. They didn't.
Oh. Well,
that sort of would give
important to find out at the end. Yeah. All right. Well, look.
Look, this is a bad environment. People are really turned off by Joe Biden. Are they?
I mean, they're willing to say as much when there's no election on the line.
Exactly.
That's what you're always telling us, and I think that's great.
The Times Siena polling wasn't alone in this regard. Virtually all the major public pollsters told the same basic story, and it's the opposite of the story we told after the election. This is why the pundits drive me nuts. Well, if you look at the underlying fundamentals, it clearly shows that there's a red wave. And after the election, I told you the polls were close.
Yeah. Well, there's always an excuse, I suppose.
Well, why didn't you say that everything you told us was wrong? And Nate Cohn is saying, you know what? Everything we told you was wrong.
Oh, we'll see.
If we judge these poll questions about the issues by the same standard that we judge main election results, the comparison between pre-election polls and what we believe to be true after, with the benefit of the results, I think we'd have to say complete misfire. Now, if you do this exercise for previous elections, issue polling failures look more like the norm than the exception. In other words, we always get this wrong. We always screw this up.
Why don't they just use the special sauce and make the polls right the first time and just say whatever we found is wrong?
Armando used to say that about the various pollsters, especially Zogby.
Sure.
There just aren't many elections when you can read a pre-election poll story, line it up with the post-election story, and say a pre-election poll capture the most important dynamics. Okay, for example, CBS, New York Times, Pew Research, and ABC Washington Post polls in 2016 election barely shed any light at all on Donald Trump's strength. They contributed essentially nothing to the decade-long debate about whether the economy, racial resentment, immigration, or anything else helped explain Trump's success among white working-class voters. With such a poor track record, and that's, by the way, why everybody fanned out to the diners.
Okay.
Because the polling didn't help them. They didn't know. So they all went to West Virginia to have omelet for lunch. With such a poor track record, there's a case. Issue polling faces a far graver crisis than horse race polling.
But should it?
I can imagine many public pollsters recoiling at that assertion, but they can't prove it wrong either. So in fairness to pollsters, the problem isn't only the usual questions probably don't fully portray the attitudes of the electorate. And we know that because the focus groups tell us. You know, I voted for Biden, but I'm probably going to vote for Trump in this election because I'm really pro-abortion rights and Biden's against it. That's what people actually told focus groups.
They do say this. Yeah, so one wonders why anyone polls anyone at all.
Why can't pick up the nuance here? Because the people who are telling you, answering the polls and talking to the focus groups, don't know squat about what's actually going on.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, pollsters?
Yeah, right. Well, what kind of question do you ask them? Do you know anything? No.
I'm a moderate. Why are you a moderate? Because I think that drug dealers should all be shot on sight. And at the same time, I think that student loans should be completely forgiven.
That would be moderate.
So I'm in the middle. If you average those two attitudes.
I see what they're talking about.
I'm a moderate.
Even if they don't. Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose you could come out that way. I don't know.
He says pollsters are trying to figure out what's driving the behavior of voters, and that's a different and more challenging question than measuring who they'll vote for or what they believe.
Sure.
These causal questions are beyond what a single poll with issue questions can answer. So over the next year, we're going to try to bring some of these tools into our polling. For example, we tried one experiment in our latest Times Siena Battleground state poll. Yeah. Remember the one that said Trump was leading in 5 of 6 states, except for Wisconsin?
Who could forget it?
Or 4 of 5 states, or 7 of 5
minutes.
states. We split the sample into two halves. One half was asked whether they'd vote for a typical Democrat against a Republican expressing a moderate view on abortion or democracy. The other half was given the same Democrat against a Republican expressing a more conservative or MAGA view on abortion or democracy. And the next time I write about this, I'll tell you about the results.
Oh, we have to wait.
Yeah.
Like the election.
But he's trying to get a sense of
Yeah.
Does your view of Gene, Eric,
actual people,
Democrat.
Right. Oh, Gene, Eric, Democrat. Okay.
Right. Gene, Eric, Democrat
Hello, my
is
name
running.
Is Gene, Eric, Democrat. That's good. I like that.
And then, what if he's running against Nancy Mace, who's obviously a moderate because everybody tells us so, versus James Comer,
moderate,
or Mike Johnson, who's clearly not.
I mean, that's a very moderate name,
right? Okay, well, Matt Gaetz. The point is, you get the same
Madison Cawthorn,
generic Democrat, Gene, Eric, Democrat,
Jen. Right,
running against one of these people, and how do you feel about them depends upon who they're running against, and we're going to try and test for this.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I see what he means.
So it's interesting,
and of course, there's message sending, and I'm going to
all
withhold
of that. And then there's campaigns and what they emphasize, and so on and so forth. But the point is, it's not surprising that all of these pundits would say, "Oh my gosh, look at this NBC polls. You see, this tells us that." You don't know what this poll tells you. You don't know squat about what this poll tells you.
True.
You're not even that good at reading what the poll says, and you're certainly not good at understanding what the poll can't tell you.
Yeah, I guess I would be worse at that. You can't tell me that. You're right. And I can't tell you anything either because all I'm doing is reading. I can't tell you
how they're going to vote next year. Well, then why are you talking about what this means now?
Why are we listening to you?
Why are we listening
what is this show about? Yeah. That's a good point. And
that was a pretty honest I agree. Look at what's going on with the polls here.
There's a lot that can still be dug out by others as well. And then, of course, I don't know. The more I was thinking about it, we're thinking about the idea of polling a year ahead of time and doing issues polling and then finding out that it's either the opposite or something else turns out to have been true. And I guess one of the other things is, well, campaigns then spent a year convincing you that something else was more important or that the thing you thought was unimportant really was.
Caravans.
Yeah. There's certainly any number of outcomes from the attempt, but I suppose if you say, what are your top issues today? And people say what they are and then say, now, under relentless campaigning and millions of dollars spent in order to change your mind, right, where do you think we're going to land later?
What's the biggest issue going right now? The UAW strike. Maybe it was the rail strike because how it could affect the economy. Maybe it was inflation, which is down. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, gas prices are the lowest it's been since January. And did you know this Thanksgiving, American families percent change over last year, gasoline's down 5.3% deflation. People wanted to have lower prices. Okay, you're getting lower prices.
Yeah, but I meant like $2 lower. That's what I want.
Used cars and trucks down 7%. Car and truck rentals down 9.6%. Airline fares down 13%. You're traveling during Thanksgiving. You're going to notice this. Dishes and flatware down 3%. Cookware and tableware down 3%. Living room, kitchen, and dining room furniture down 4%. Televisions down 9%. Toys down 4%. This is stuff you're going to find out when you do your Black Friday stuff that you were talking about at the beginning of the show. Thanksgiving costs are down this year from turkey to travel thanks to cooling inflation. So all of that matters.
Yes, although that's something I would probably have to turn to statistics to realize. I mean, I'm not going to notice the difference.
But it's still higher than when I was 10.
Yeah, right.
Why am I mad at Joe Biden?
I like the good old days. Exactly.
Why are you mad at Joe Biden? Because that's the choice you gave me when you asked me. Do you think that prices generally go up, or I should blame Joe Biden? That's my choice. Well, yeah. I chose Joe Biden. I got to blame somebody.
Right. Sure. No, and almost nobody will answer a poll question unprepared. Are prices generally going up, or are they generally going down right now? Up. Obviously, they only go up. They never come down. Well, it turns out that they are coming down. Well, I don't know about that.
Oh yeah. Well, listen. The gas prices are going down. Employment is at record lows. Inflation is under control. There's more business startups than ever before. All of these things are true. So are we in a recession? Of course we're in a recession. Don't you ever watch TikTok?
Yeah, right. The people have said it. Some people. Them. They.
Influencers. I feel like I should be influenced by them.
Right. Yeah. Well, meanwhile, where are all these kids getting money for these expensive phones if the economy is so bad? And the answer is
travel is expected to be at a new record peak this summer. How is that happening if we're all broke and the economy's collapsing?
We're looking for work. Leaving the Dust Bowl? Is that the travel?
That's when you look at issues polling and you look at stuff like that, you say, none of this makes any sense. I don't get it.
Well, yeah. All right. Unsurprising, though, that then when election time rolls around, either other subjects are on people's minds or they have been persuaded in some way.
Yeah, and they answer differently than what you said they were going to do a year ago.
Plus all the psychology of, well, the time for me to leverage my objections is now. I'm going to say I'm withholding my vote from Joe Biden, and maybe I'll change my mind.
Why is the economy bad? Because the rail strike and the UAW strike, well, that was last month, and several months before that. They're gone. Mm-hmm. They're over. They actually had good resolution. They had such good resolution that non-UAW people beyond the big three are getting raises.
So maybe now, should we have sympathy for Republican whips in the House that they can't count votes? No, because they don't even try.
Well,
but,
well, they sort of poll their members.
Also, they do that, and they do it like
maybe
hours
they're not good at
before
issues
the vote.
polling either.
Yeah, but it is almost always election
I polled my
day.
members on this issue, and they told me they were going to vote for it, and they didn't.
Right. And then
it's not my fault. Issues polling has an issue all over the country. I just read that.
Yeah,
not my fault. Don't fire me.
Don't look at me. That could be the excuse. But they're constantly polling their members too, and votes change when push comes to shove, just as they do for members of the public. I'm angry about something now, and in a year when it's Trump or Biden, damn it. Okay, not Trump. Click. All right. Very good. Well, it is Thanksgiving week. We'll have to decide on our schedules, but maybe Wednesday, yes? All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're working out our schedule for the rest of the week. Sounds like we might be able to get together and do a Wednesday thing. We may be able to do a Thursday thing, but it'll just be me doing it, and I don't know whether that's a wise idea or not. Most people are probably pretty busy. Wednesday will be our annual traditional, whatever is going on in the kitchen is just going on in the kitchen, and you all have to listen to it show. So we're prepared for that, and it's important to keep you occupied. Maybe you'll be cooking, baking, preparing things ahead of time, starting to make noise in your kitchen as well. Thursday, we'll find some way of keeping you company, whether that's with a pre-taped show or a rerun show or what the hell, let's do it live show, maybe only for an hour. I don't know. We got to figure these things out, and it's up to you somehow to determine how we'll handle this. You can weigh in on it using the usual channels to reach us. Speaking of which, if you, again, want to use Blue Sky as one of those channels, I have some codes available. Many others are still offering codes. We may have reached the saturation point of getting those codes into the hands of people who actually give a crap about that and who listen to the show. It's a very small Venn diagram for you, but if you're still interested, there's still ways to get you a code. So you want to join the party and look at things that looked like the way Twitter used to work back in the day before Elon Musk bought it, but at a lower volume level, let's say, you can still give it a try. And I don't know, is that an endorsement? Do they need to send me some money for that one? All right. Well, let's see. I have a couple of stories set aside for you, some of which are directly relevant to your life as an American and some of which are not, but which you might want to hear about because as an American, you want to hear about ridiculous things, particularly when they happen in other countries and not at the moment in our country, but soon enough. Soon enough. Like the last administration, we had all of this going on. So while you may be tempted to point and laugh at Argentina, remember, please, that they were pointing and laughing at you just a few years ago. That might motivate you to want to do that now. You know, we're not all great people. Sometimes we take some comfort in this. What's the story for this one? Time Magazine will explain it to us because they're the only one so far that has been interested in giving over their print space to this nonsense at this level or this depth, I guess, of Argentina. Everyone is telling us about that. Argentina just elected an eccentric populist who seeks counsel from his cloned dogs. Yeah, like up until the first half of it was like, oh, it's normalization, just like our idiot eccentric populist, who wasn't really a populist. But he seeks counsel from his cloned dogs. The one we elected accidentally or whatever, hated dogs, I think, because he kept comparing everyone who, in his view, had failed at something as having failed or choked like a dog. I don't know what he thinks is happening with dogs around this country, but anyway, I'll tell you what's going on with dogs in another country instead, which it's pretty wild. So what's his name? Javier Milei? Milei. How does he say that? M-I-L-E-I. I mean, in Spanish, I'm having trouble figuring out how that would be pronounced. Milei. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. He's brand new on the scene, and American anchors are no doubt screwing that up left and right. But so maybe I should tune into Argentine television to figure this out. All right, what's happening here? Chad de Guzman, or Guzman, perhaps, is the writer for Time, which still exists, believe it or not, a decisive majority of Argentinian voters. I prefer, again, another maybe Britishism of calling them Argentine. Do they not do that here in this country? A decisive majority, really, of Argentinian voters opted for trying something new. A military dictatorship. What a new idea. He's not military, so... But it may be a military dictatorship in the end anyway, or something quite like it. You might not be able to tell the difference between, let's say, the politics of a military dictatorship and this dude. But they opted to try something new, which I guess would be new, when they elected Javier Milei. Somebody, please look that up for me and send me a message. It's going to drive me crazy. He's the subject of the story. Is there any way to do this and find out on the fly? Let me see. I'm sorry, but this is going to drive me crazy if I don't figure this out. So what does Google have to say about pronouncing it? Milei. Okay. Javier Gerardo Milei. Milei. I can see that. E-I. Milei, essentially. And I guess they'll sort of drop that last half E. Milei. Okay. I think the English version of it there is Milei. And probably, if you're pronouncing it correctly in Spanish, Milei, but drop that last. All right. You see what I'm talking about? Okay. This is tough. All right. But that helps us get through the article. Amid soaring inflation, and it was really soaring, Greg told us 200%. That's crazy. But that, South America, that occasionally happens. Elsewhere in the world as well. Anyway, amid soaring inflation and rising poverty, Milei, a right-wing populist who promised a radical shakeup of the government, you heard him promising that in Spanish and firing every minister, defeated incumbent economy minister, right? You got to believe they were upset about having nominated that guy with an economy like they've got 200% inflation. But it was economy minister Sergio Massa in a runoff election, on Sunday, with more than 55% of the votes, the highest percentage a presidential candidate has received since Argentina's return to democracy from military dictatorship in 1983. We'll get to the important part about dogs pretty soon, I think. The 53-year-old lawmaker, who has self-identified as libertarian and anarcho-capitalist, that's in quotes, campaigned on slashing public spending, eliminating the central bank, and switching the nation's currency from the Argentinian peso to the U.S. dollar. Oh, interesting. Did we give you permission for that? Among other drastic economic measures, that is a drastic measure. He also rallied against sex education in schools. Okay. Because that's very costly, I guess. Pledged to curb abortion access and rejected climate science as a socialist conspiracy. So they're going to do great. But more than any of his policy proposals or platform details, Milei primarily came to be known throughout the turbulent election season as an eccentric. That's primarily what he was known as, okay? A former rock musician who once jammed in a Rolling Stones tribute band. That's barely, okay, whatever. The wild-haired Milei rose to prominence as a prolific economist and TV and radio commentator. I mean, that seems, he is an economist And he could be prolific as an economist, publishing a lot, but I guess he was probably more prolific as a TV and radio commentator, but a prolific economist? All right. Well, they said it, not me. On the campaign trail, he wielded a chainsaw on stage and smashed a piñata on air to symbolize his plans, which is interesting. I mean, I guess he's smashing the administrative state, maybe like Steve Bannon would have you say, but I mean, that's what you're supposed to do with a piñata, so I don't know how symbolic. Okay, whatever. It's symbolism is different there, I guess. He has made bold remarks, and this is a bold one, ranging from calling Pope Francis a filthy leftist to hailing American gangster Al Capone, who remains dead, by the way, as a hero. In what sense? A hero for syphilitics everywhere, I guess. Milei's critics have often pointed to his outlandish behavior and bizarre pronouncements to argue his incompetency to rule. Argentinian journalist Juan Luis Gonzalez's unauthorized biography about Milei is entitled El Loco, which they translate as the madman here, but yeah, the crazy guy. El Loco. I mean, I think everybody kind of recognizes that. Makes him sound like a luchador here, but that's probably popular on the right wing there. But political observers say Milei's election represents less a personal endorsement and more an outcry of frustration against the status quo. I could believe that. Local political consultant Lucas Romero told the Associated Press, this is a triumph that is less due to Milei and his peculiarities and particularities, and more to the demand for change. Okay, I understand that and all, but boy, are you going to be... well, wait till you see what happens. Maybe I'll love it. I don't know. Still, perhaps nothing has raised more questions about the president-elect's mental acuity and fitness to lead than the widely reported and ridiculed matter of whom he turns to for advice. Isn't that really to whom he turns for advice? But okay. That's Time Magazine for you. Conan O'Brien? Conan the Barbarian? No, Conan the dog. Conan, Murray, Milton, Robert, and Lucas. They were the first people he thanked when he finished first in the country's presidential primaries in August. Except they're not really people. Who else? He said. My four-legged children, referring to his 5 dogs, whom he has called the best strategists. And I understand people are close to their pets, their fur babies, as they might call them. But, you know, in the presidential context, you win the primary, you got up and thank your family. You know, it's nice. Acknowledge your dogs, I guess. But to thank them first, I guess there's just nobody else in his life, is a little bit odd, and it's also odd that he has nobody else in his life, but okay, whatever. So Conan, Murray, Milton, Robert, and Lucas. And I wonder if they're named for people in particular. We'll find out. Yes is the answer, I think, at least with respect to Conan. When Conan died in 2017, like this poses a problem. I thank my dog Conan, but Conan died. Well, don't you worry, or don't be so sure about that. When Conan died in 2017, Milei reportedly visited a medium to communicate with his late beloved pet. That would have been hilarious if the medium had just barked at him instead. But anyway, it was in that telepathic conversation, Milei has said, he actually talks about this, that Conan relayed God's mission for him to become president of Argentina. Yep, he's on a mission from God too, and the dog told him. And I got to tell you that here in the United States, when the dog starts telling you God's command, that's usually, I mean, for me, that's more associated with the Son of Sam killer than anybody else. But, you know, in Argentina, it gets you elected president. According to Argentina's La Nación newspaper, Milei believes that he and Conan first met in a previous life. I don't know whether he was a dog or not. More than 2,000 years ago, as a gladiator and lion in the Roman Colosseum, and that the pair did not fight because they were destined to join forces in the future, which he believes was a prophecy of his animal-influenced presidential campaign. And here's an animal that will join us to comment on that. or at least the mechanical representation of an animal. That is unusual, to say the least. And but hey, he was building coalitions even 2,000 years ago as a gladiator in the Roman Colosseum, making common cause somehow with a lion, bringing the two sides together. Okay, and then coming back as an Argentinian presidential candidate and a dog. Makes sense. I haven't stopped broadcasting. I've been stunned into silence. In 2018, Milei went on to pay about $50,000, according to Reuters. Remember, rampant inflation down there. $50,000, according to Reuters and the New York Times, to U.S. company, this is the name of the company that will clone your pet, Perpetuate. Wow. That is lame. To clone Conan using his DNA. And really, why even bother if these... That's an interesting choice to make. I believe he's been reincarnated. He was a lion 2,000 years ago, and we've been reincarnated maybe over and over again. Maybe we were just put on hold until now, but the supernatural forces that control this stuff, whatever they may be, have brought us back together here in Argentina as, at the time, I guess, a lawmaker and a dog. And then I'm going to interfere with this, and I'm going to reincarnate Conan. And, I feel like maybe you're interfering with the universe's message, if that's something you believe in. But, okay, well, he cloned Conan, or maybe it was, well, now you have the technology and the ability to make the choice yourself. I no longer have to keep reincarnating things for you. Maybe that's the justification. Well, this is something that Milei had reportedly been planning to do for some time. The procedure resulted in 5 puppies, whom Milei named after the original Conan. And I had a feeling this might be the case. The Economist, Murray Rothbard, as soon as I saw Milton, I'm like, that's Milton Friedman. Unless it's Milton the Toaster from Pop-Tarts. But okay. Milton Friedman and Robert Lucas. Milei regularly refers to the current clone Conan as his son, like Nestor, for instance, or who else have we got out there that... all right. Doesn't Mike Johnson have an adopted son as well? Anyway, and he doesn't distinguish him from the original Conan because DNA cloning, and the other 4 dogs as his grandchildren. So Conan is his son, the other 4 are grandkids. Gonzalez and other Argentine news outlets, there's the construction I was looking for, Argentine news outlets, have reported that Milei seeks counsel from his dogs on matters of his campaign, policy, and more. And if at any point he says all Argentines should eat their own vomit, you'll know where that came from. In an August interview with Spanish newspaper, I don't know why this strikes me as funny, but the Spanish or the television news magazine 60 Minutes. This is the Spanish newspaper 20 Minutos, 20 minutes. I don't know why the newspaper is shorter than the television show. It just is. Gonzalez said that Milei, quote, is convinced that the dogs advise him in different areas. One in politics, another in economics, another gives him general advice. The other is a dating guru, probably, I guess, pickup artist. Gonzalez added that he is worried about such an unstable leader in an already unstable Argentina. This man, who would command the fate of the country, wakes up each day, does medium sessions with the dogs, and then makes a decree based on that. It's very shocking. When asked by The Economist in September about the reports of his unconventional canine cabinet, Milei didn't deny it, responding with seeming pride. What is it they say? That my dogs determine my strategies? Yes. That they are like a strategic committee? They are the best strategic committee in the world. Tell me, when has an outsider achieved what we achieved in 2 years? If so, they are the best political analysts in the world. And I suppose he has a point in that. But, just very interesting. And, maybe most economists, if they're honest, would say that their advice is probably not any different than just pretending your dog is talking to you, right? So, I just thought I would fill you in on that one. That's pretty wild, don't you think? Okay, let's see. Other things that I have to share with you that have been waiting in pocket. Oh, some of them we've already covered, just because Greg and I, and as it turns out, Marcy Wheeler, think along the same lines. So let's see. There was Marcy's piece, which I had to share. And, oh dear, look at this. Some of these things that are, well, are all of them like this? I had a Blue Sky tweet marked, and it's asking me to sign in order to see it. And I find that odd. Let's see. Is this going to happen for every single one of them? Yeah, okay. Oh, I remember. This is well, switching subjects. Maybe we'll just jump around a little bit, and probably the whole week will be a little bit like this. I thought this was an interesting thing that I saw just heading into the weekend. Being distributed via Blue Sky from the messages of J. Van Bavel, I guess. J. Van Bavel, PhD, thank you very much. Worked hard to get that PhD, so we might as well let him know about it, or let you know about it. And he was circulating, is it his work or just someone? Yeah, it is. Look at that. The costs of polarizing a pandemic. Can you guess what this is about? Antecedents, consequences, and lessons. And okay, this is not going to be red meat in the initial expression, I guess, because this is an academic paper. But Paul Rosenberg did pull a quote from it that gets at the heart of it and what we'll be looking for from a paper like this, given who we are. But this is a very straightforward, serious academic paper. The costs of polarizing a pandemic. You can guess where that's going to land. It's in it's a paper published, by I guess in the journal of the Association for Psychological Science. And in the abstract here, the dry language of, yeah, maybe we won't say, one party or the other, perhaps, but if you polarize the science or politicize the science, you're going to come out with some bad results. And Paul pulls this one out, a quote from the paper. Although COVID-19 has proven more lethal than any war or public health crisis in American history, our analysis suggests that the catastrophic death toll in the United States was largely preventable, yes, and due in large part to the polarization of the pandemic. It was the politicization, I guess, really, of the pandemic that was largely responsible for the vast majority of these preventable deaths, and we kind of know what that's about, really, convincing people that either that masks either didn't work or were somehow some sort of imposition on their liberty that they ought to resist on principle, or that school closures were a bad idea. And there's now some interesting pushback on the what had been previously, I think, had been widely accepted on both sides of the aisle, if there is even an aisle, that there was just tremendous learning loss. That was the tag they hung on it. Learning loss during the pandemic among our students. Although, as it turns out, the data don't actually hold that up, and that this is now in question. But it's something that took root. But that we shouldn't have closed the schools, that was a mistake, and in fact it was not. And as soon as we started reopening the schools, we found out that our initial understanding, quote unquote, understanding of COVID itself was wrong. Well, kids don't get it. Kids aren't susceptible. They don't spread it. No, they do. They are susceptible. They don't die as often from it as the elderly. That's true, but that's because the elderly very frequently die. That's the trajectory that everyone is on, right? So anyway, but for the elderly to succumb to disease should be no surprise. Yes, kids will be more resilient, but the idea that kids don't get it, they can't get it, probably arose from the fact that we closed the schools so that they didn't get it, more so than that there was anything special about being young that meant you wouldn't get the disease. Anyway, fundamental misunderstanding. And just a reminder, I still track those numbers nightly, and it's worth reminding ourselves that, one, now they have, quantified this and can point with numbers and data to the fact that political polarization and politicization of the pandemic led to this overwhelming number of deaths. What is the number of deaths? Well, at this point, still looking at 1.2 million reported dead and attributed to COVID, and there's all sorts of reasons to believe that that's a severe undercount. And of course, I look back nightly at how many people died after Trump got COVID, like at the peak of everything, actually came down with COVID himself and was miraculously cured of COVID, although he does show some cognitive damage, but I'm not certain that we can pinpoint it to COVID because he always showed signs of cognitive damage. But, since he got out of the hospital when he caught COVID and was cured, and then, of course, filmed himself on the lawn, I think the South Lawn, perhaps, of the White House, promising Regeneron therapy to every vulnerable senior in America, delivered direct to your doorstep at no cost by the U.S. military. He swore he was going to go right inside and sign that order and make it happen, and then didn't. But since he said he was going to save everybody from it, 1 million people have died, reported dead of COVID, and that, again, probably an undercount. 1 million deads. Now, he has been president the whole time, but, he said he found the miracle cure and was going to pretty much wipe COVID off the map on October 8th, 2020. And what do you know? The difference between marching straight inside and signing an executive order and ordering the military to deliver this miracle cure to everyone and to wipe out COVID and put a stop to it, just as he had in his own treatment at Walter Reed, didn't happen. And, well, things kind of got away from us after that. And yeah, sure, we switched presidents, but by that point we were pretty much on an unstoppable trajectory because Trump, as president, told everybody, well, one, don't worry about it. I got this. I'll cure you all. And two, in the meantime, drink your fish tank, eat the horse medicine, inject yourself with bleach, put a light bulb wherever, and don't worry about it. And maybe it's not real, and kids don't get it, and it's probably a hoax, and China did it, and we're going to bomb them, and something. And it was out of our hands by that point. Just kind of pointing that out is probably the most cynical thing ever. We really don't pay enough attention to the fact that, remember also the date is early October 2020, where I think it was either October 8th that he made that speech. And therefore I've been measuring since October 7th. But at any rate, it's really one of the most cynical things ever. And I still wonder whether future historians, or people studying history will say, well, I can't believe you did nothing about this president making this incredibly cynical play a month out from the election, telling the most frightened people in America, the vulnerable seniors, when there was no vaccine yet, and who knew when the vaccine was going to come around. We just weren't sure whether this was really going to work or not, whether there was going to be any way to stop this thing. And he tells seniors, of course, the most regular voters, etc., I'll save you, and only I can say, I'm going to deploy the military, I'm going to be commander in chief, and then to do nothing is really remarkable. And I don't know, we are going to wonder about this. And of course, it reminds me that they didn't know it at the time, and you can't blame them as practicing physicians. They really had very little choice in the matter about what to do. But the doctors at Walter Reed, wow, looking back on how they handled the trolley problem, where would we be? Sometimes you wonder about this stuff. Where would we be in terms of tamping down on the pandemic or having handled it differently? Had in the middle of the peak of the fright of this thing, had the COVID denier in chief actually been struck down by COVID right before our very eyes, would that have changed the outcome? Or do we think maybe it's possible that MAGA America would have come up with an excuse for it somehow? Well, that just goes to show you, or something else, or it was something else that killed him. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, well, anyway, I think you get the point here. Just, I found it interesting, and I would like to share, I guess, Paul Rosenberg's message with you here, calling out this one line from Jay Van Bevel's piece here, but I'll provide both so that you can also read the underlying academic paper. I don't know if you have access to the whole thing or not, but you'll certainly be able to get the idea. And failing the trolley problem, the poor doctors there. I mean, I do wonder what the outcome would have been if everyone had been somehow awoken, stunned into waking up and realizing what was really going on here. The guy who says COVID is a hoax of some kind, or masks don't work, or something, yada yada, and then the cautionary tale of having him struck dead in front of everybody. Although again, they probably would have said, oh, who knows? He was assassinated, or he died of some other thing, or, plenty of people certainly who were COVID deniers who then went on to die from COVID, denied that was what killed them. Their family would carry on that legacy, or people say they died with COVID, but not of COVID. There's plenty of capacity to deny, I guess. But I do wonder whether it might have changed things. I don't know. Okay, let's see. A couple of other items to touch on, and let's see. Some of them have been waiting for quite a while. Oh, yes. All right. So I guess this comes late at this point, given the news from out of Colorado, but maybe this will help explain and further contextualize this and others. This one discussing the Michigan ruling, and I have been holding on for a while, and I think I may have even put it in one of the roundups a couple of days ago, maybe middle of last week, why Trump might not be disqualified until January 6th, 2025. A slightly different approach to the disqualification case taken in Michigan. Not entirely different in terms of the outcome. Neither Michigan nor Colorado agreed to hold Trump ineligible to appear on the ballot. And we have 2 or 3 different rulings here. We have one state, and I can't remember if I can keep them all straight. Maybe it's Michigan after all. We'll find out when we read this article. That said, well, it's too early to be disqualifying him from the next ballot on which he would appear, which would, of course, be the primary ballot in each state. And here, there's nothing about the 14th Amendment that speaks to disqualification in terms of a private, essentially, organization, a private organization, a political party from nominating you. It's really a question of whether or not you are eligible to assume office. And they're saying that the question isn't ripe yet. He's not been elected, and we might even have to wait until he's elected, and maybe all the way until he's actually formally elected via the Electoral College and the ratification of its vote in Congress on January 6, 2025. And at that point, you could say, well, now there's a real live controversy here, something that you might not be able to say in November of 2020 when he is projected to become the winner, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe not even on December 14th when the Electoral College meets. So there's an argument for stretching it all the way out to January 6th, and that's sort of interesting. This coverage from, like I said, MSNBC. A judge's ruling in Michigan sets the stage for Congress, not the courts, to make the final call on whether Trump is barred under the 14th Amendment. Of course, the Colorado case says maybe it is up to the courts after all, just not this one, and sends the decision on. So very different. Hayes Brown, writing this for MSNBC. Efforts to block former President Donald Trump from being on the ballot next year have yet to score a major win in court. Nobody in power seems willing to decide whether the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause disqualifies him from returning to the White House. Instead, judges and state officials have either pawned off that decision to someone else or determined that there will be some other better time to make a judgment. Though now I'm wondering, as I mentioned before, now that they have this state court decision in Colorado, I don't know how much weight it would be given in federal court, where you'd have to bring this question of whether or not, if you wanted to bring a new case saying Trump should be charged with violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 2383, you could try that, and you could try then and bring, well, whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States and the laws thereof, or gives aid and comfort thereto. I think you could certainly point to the Colorado finding there, though it comes from a state court. They may or may not find that persuasive as evidence of violation, but you could certainly and you'd have every opportunity to conduct your own inquiry in district court, in federal district court, no matter where you file it. And maybe someone wants to follow up on that. I'm sure that the original plaintiffs in the Colorado case, which might be Crew, if I recall correctly, they'll probably be very interested in bringing that forward. Plus, of course, seeing where appeals go with this thing. Okay, so back to MSNBC. The result is a rapidly shrinking window for that decision to be made, the disqualification decision. And based on the standard in a ruling issued in Michigan on last Tuesday, we might not know the answer until after all the votes have been cast on Election Day next year. It might be after the presidential electors have met and submitted their ballots. It might come down to Congress on January 6, 2025, to decide whether Trump is even eligible to become president. Earlier this year, legal scholars, including prominent conservatives, came out and supported the idea that Trump is constitutionally ineligible for office and that it fell to election officials to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That section bars from federal and state office anyone who previously swore to support the Constitution but then had engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to enemies thereof. Since then, much of the energy from democracy activists and lawyers has focused on convincing secretaries of state of the argument, but they've met with either hesitancy or outright rejection from officials. At best, as is the case of Michigan's Jocelyn Benson, there has been an openness to acting, provided that a court rules whether Trump's role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol triggered the insurrection clause. Interesting. And again, the Colorado case triggers the definition, it trips the insurrection definition, certainly, but it's the penalty phase that the judge in Colorado says doesn't apply because of her interesting and maybe possibly facially valid reading of the language of the 14th Amendment in terms of to whom this applies. And I guess it's possible that the framers of the 14th Amendment mightn't have meant to exclude the president on the premise that, of course, the president would never lead an insurrection against the government of the United States. He basically, certainly according to unitary executive theory, which they didn't necessarily explicitly believe in at that point, but he sort of personifies the United States government. What purpose would there be for a president to launch an insurrection against himself? And they just, it might be something they didn't see coming, because why a president wouldn't need to launch an insurrection against himself. He's already in power. But what if he was on his way out of power because he had lost the election? And they may have said, well, if you lose the election, you lose the election. You're out. That's the end of it. You can't, no one would ever, because everyone would say, that's crazy. It's the end of American democracy. And how could a person who was in contention for the presidency abandon democratic principles on a whim so quickly? And the answer is, I don't know, but they can. So why didn't you think about it? There was just a civil war. Anyway, I guess they should have gone through the thought exercise of, what if the North had lost the war or was losing the war, and Lincoln wasn't assassinated and was reelected to the presidency by the northern states, and Jefferson Davis was apparently elected to the presidency by the southern states, and you have two claimants, and well, I don't know. I still would have probably imagined at that point, well, but Lincoln is the right one and Davis is the wrong one, and that's the answer. So, I don't know. Anyway, one of the cases seeking such a ruling fell short on Tuesday. That's the one in Michigan that they're discussing here. Judge James Robert Redford, James Robert Redford, rightfully noted in his decision that Michigan state law doesn't provide for the Secretary of State to block a party from naming a primary candidate. The Minnesota Supreme Court reached a similar conclusion last week, that'd be now 2 weeks ago, finding that the question of whether Trump could appear on the general election ballot wasn't ripe, meaning about to occur. The Minnesota court didn't close the door on another challenge later, but as my colleague Jordan Rubin noted, Redford suggested that even the general election might not be enough to warrant the court's intervening. Instead, Redford said the whole thing might be a political question, best left to the people or their elected representatives. The judge further noted that the Constitution's 12th and 20th Amendments directly deal with the election of the president and the vice president, and that both of them gave that role to Congress. Okay. It's worth pausing here to take a step back and note that technically it's the Electoral College that votes for president, and though the drafters of the Constitution foresaw electors as independent, well-respected members of the community who would adjudicate the candidate's qualifications, that's not how it has played out. Each state generally assigns its electoral votes based on who won the popular vote, which is reflected in partisan slates of Electoral College members. Those slates then vote for their party's chosen candidates, and those votes are then transmitted to Congress to be counted. Part of Trump's scheme in 2020 was to have his slate of candidates in states he'd lost, like Georgia, declare that they were the real electors and have Republicans in Congress or Vice President Mike Pence use the confusion to declare Trump the winner. Yes, in one way or another. In response, Congress last year passed the Electoral Count Reform Act to forestall similar attempts to reverse future elections results. It made clear that the vice president, who presides over the count, cannot be able to unilaterally decide whether a state's electoral votes are valid. The law also narrowed the grounds for objecting to a state's slate of electoral votes, including that the vote of one or more electors has not been regularly given. That last bit, not regularly given, is key for understanding how much disagreement remains over when and whether Trump could be disqualified. An order in an ongoing case about this issue in Colorado, now decided, which Redford cited, claimed that the phrasing means that, quote, Congress has disavowed any ability it once had to consider objections other than the two listed above, including any regarding the constitutional qualifications of the president-elect. But University of Iowa law professor Derek Muller noted in an article for the Georgia Law Review written before the Electoral Count Act was amended that the term could apply to a number of circumstances, including if the elector cast a vote for a candidate ineligible to be elected to that office. The ECRA, and there's any number of things too, right? Although this brings us back, just a pause here, to the point that people were making earlier in the debate over this, right? Like, for instance, while secretaries of state and even courts are punting on this and saying, God, it's so fraught, this question of whether or not you can deny someone's eligibility as a judge or as a elections official, etc. Well, gee whiz, did he engage in insurrection? I don't know. Well, now we have a court finding that he did, but still the same court that found that he was guilty of insurrection still said, we're just uncomfortable making the call. Well, who's to say whether he's disqualified or not? And it seems to me in my reading of the 14th Amendment that only Congress can make that decision. Because there is note in here somewhere, it does say Congress may by a 2/3 vote of each house remove such disability. That's interesting all by itself. And I mean, that's kind of why I have proposed from time to time, well, what if a Democrat right now moved a privileged resolution, or, perhaps it wouldn't be privileged until January 6th, but suppose you move a resolution actually proposing to remove the disqualification, remove the disability, right? Well, they might table it in the House, of course, but it'd be interesting to see them tabling it because it would cause a problem for them. But remember, if the actual wording of the resolution is to remove the disability, it would be really interesting to watch Republicans. I mean, they could do it because they can argue anything if they're gimmitarian enough, but to argue against a resolution removing Trump's disability to serve under the 14th Amendment and clearing the path for him to serve. But of course, the idea would be, well, a Democrat would propose it, but no Democrat would necessarily vote for it. You can offer a resolution and then vote against it if you want to. So if it doesn't get 2/3, the constitutionally required threshold for removing the disability, and the resolution fails, then the question is, well, does that mean that Congress has declined to remove the disability? Yes. Does that also mean there was a disability to begin with? Republicans would argue no. Democrats would argue yes. And I guess combined with a court finding that he did engage in insurrection, if you have both a court saying Trump engaged in insurrection as defined by the 14th Amendment, and the question of whether or not he is disqualified is up to Congress, and the only mention of things that Congress can do in making a decision about this disability is to remove it by 2/3, and they have had a vote on removing it and declined to do so. That's now like, 2 out of 3 of the, I guess, necessary elements to disqualifying him, and arguably 3 out of 3. I don't know, or one of the 3, that he did engage in insurrection and that the Congress at least declined to remove it. And I guess you'd be inventing a third step, which is that Congress would have to outright declare, yes, we actively disqualify him as well. So they could hold a vote on that. And I suppose Republicans could move to table, they could convince their members to table the facially pro-Trump resolution from Democrats and instead vote directly on the question of, is it the sense of the House that Donald Trump is disqualified from eligibility? And they would vote yes, and they would be able to do that, as a sense of the House resolution with no binding legal authority. Or I guess they could come up with something. I don't know. I guess they really can't. Anyway, but to come up with a resolution that says we don't believe that he's disqualified, and they could pass that, but then you'd have to point back to the explicit wording of the 14th Amendment and say this is clearly of no effect. The only thing that's described here is the necessity of a 2/3 majority. So while you can express the sense of the House that he's not guilty of insurrection, or the sense of the House that he's not disqualified in the first place, rendering the necessity of 2/3 to remove the disqualification moot, I don't know if it has any value. And, well, that's pretty, that's a complicated question, to say the least. Let's finish up the piece here. After that, that's a hell of a tangent. The ECRA also raised the bar for objecting to electoral ballots. Instead of needing just one representative and one senator in each house, the law now requires 1/5 of each house to sign on, or 20 senators plus 87 representatives. It's not hard to imagine that many Democrats being willing to do so if we reach the end of the 2024, or the end of 2024, without a firm answer one way or the other. The House and Senate would then split off to debate the question for 2 hours, then hold a vote. If a majority of both houses agreed to the objection, it would stand, and then the votes would be set aside. That process would then, in theory, be repeated for however many states' electors voted for Trump. Bear in mind that this would be taking place in a world where Trump has not only won the GOP nomination, but also the general election. While many of the pending cases may hope to reach the Supreme Court for a ruling ahead of the election, it's possible that the conservative justices would also punt while citing the political question doctrine. If that's the case, it's difficult to see this as not being one of the biggest questions for members of Congress on the campaign trail leading up to 2024. Will you vote to disqualify Donald Trump on January 6th? That's exactly the kind of chaos that organizers hoped to prevent in trying to prevent Trump from being a candidate at all. Because, unlike his coup attempt, Congress in this case would be fulfilling its constitutional duty if it were to disqualify Trump when it counts electoral votes. It wouldn't be an act of delayed justice after the Senate acquitted him on his second impeachment trial and lost the accompanying chance to bar him from holding future office. At the time, the argument from Republicans like Senator Mitch McConnell was that the courts would be the one to hold him accountable, a deeply ironic sentiment given the court's insistence that this is a matter for Congress. That's pretty amazing, right? I mean, do we follow that logic? McConnell says, let's not convict him on impeachment and even consider the question of disqualifying from office. The job of handling the justice here is one for the courts. And then the courts have now been handed the question and say, this isn't for us, it's for Congress to do. That is pretty backwards and upside down. By the way, now it's making me wonder, let's look at is it Article 2 where they discuss the impeachment powers? I cannot recall which, why I can't keep the right sections in mind. I don't know. Maybe it's an Article 1 power. But, because I guess the removal power, but I feel like it's discussed in both places. But, yeah, let me look back in Article 1, and isn't it is it in Section 8 where they describe the impeachment? I can't know if I can remember exactly. All right, I'm going to have to search through this. But it occurs to me that we should probably look at the impeachment clause and the discussion of the various penalties that can be imposed. And now I wonder, does it mention whether or not that's I'm curious about what language they use about excluding him or an impeached president or impeach anybody from holding any office under the United States. And I mean, it's always been assumed that the president, were he convicted upon impeachment, could in fact be barred. But I wonder if now the language of the Colorado court, which is a state court and not a federal court, would could be leveraged to say that's actually not one of the penalties that's available. Well, I'm not immediately able to find it, and I've never did memorize which section it was in so that I could find it immediately, but perhaps we'll do that research in a second. Okay, we'll finish up the MSNBC article because it's almost time to finish up the show. Hayes finishes this way, yet in a very real sense, it can't be ignored that disqualifying Trump this way would be Congress's doing exactly what Trump has, in his projection, accused Democrats of doing, trying to reverse the results of an election. He is, again, reminding you that it's only a valid and ripe question if Trump has won the election. Although I suppose it's possible, given that he lost the election in 2020 and was still pressing the case that he should be president anyway, I suppose it's possible that in 2024 he could lose the election and then he would press the case that he really won and should be elected by Congress. And they could respond either by saying, okay, but we don't elect you, or no, you're not elected, or we're not counting your electoral votes, or you're disqualified, or all of the above. But yeah, presumably, and maybe it's just too much of an assumption now, given the events of the last time around, that this would only arise in a situation in which Trump had won the election. But okay, I see why it's just too mind-blowing to consider it in both instances. But okay, Hayes is saying if it were the case that he were to win the election and Congress were to then disqualify him, they would, in a sense, be walking directly into the trap that Trump thinks he's laid logically with people, though only his own fans really buy into it. That is, the Democrats are the ones who are reversing the results of election, not me in 2020, as I did. The fact that Trump was most likely never eligible wouldn't matter. The Republican Party, in allowing him to run and making him its nominee, will have known this was a possibility, but will still support his cries that the whole system is rigged. And if we are forced to spend the next 14 months in suspense, it will only increase the chances that when faced with this monumental decision, Congress will falter. That is pretty amazing. All right, time now for us to start wrapping things up, but maybe I can do that research and say impeachment clause and find out where they tuck this thing. Let's see. In Article 2, Section 4 is one mention. Is it the one that we're looking for? The the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States. It's an interesting way of putting it, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And that's the threshold, I guess, for defining why you would impeach someone. That's what we look to Section 4 for. Well, did you commit a high crime or misdemeanor? And then, of course, we later found out that doesn't matter and that impeachment is what the House says it is. Thank you, Gerald Ford. And as a result, the current House moving to impeach Joe Biden regardless. Then let's see, Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7 comes up here in the Google search. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7, judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further, here's the penalty part, shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless, of course, this is McConnell, was leaning on this, be liable for judgment or subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. That's sort of a different angle on this thing. But so now, what does the Colorado judge say that talking about the 14th Amendment? Sorry, I got to flip back and forth here, but they probably went through this exercise in the courtroom, but we didn't see much discussion of it. Let's see. Section 3, right? No person shall be a senator or representative of Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States. That, the judge says, well, it's not entirely clear that means the president, given that they started with senator and worked their way down. That makes a certain amount of sense, but any office, like obviously the presidency is an office. civil or military under the United States or under any states. Now, judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit. I mean, it's different wording, but any office, under the United States. Now, if this Colorado judge's interpretation of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, is correct, that because it doesn't list the presidency in that clause, it doesn't necessarily include it, and that offices under the United States can mean anything, including everything from senator on down, or that the presidency is different because they take a different oath or something. Well, then if that's the case, has our understanding of impeachment power been wrong all along? And is it the case that presidents either can't be disqualified from office upon conviction in an impeachment trial, or that they can't even be removed from office? Maybe there's no impeachment power whatsoever if this weird cockamamie idea of what constitutes an office of the United States or under the United States doesn't include the president. What a weird idea. Deserves to be tested, but naturally they'll punt, no doubt. We punt now too, to justice. Next.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yes, okay, and what comes up next? Well, he's got this for you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Trump is ramping up his dangerous rhetoric on the 2024 campaign trail. Yes, it's gotten worse than vermin, and he'll round everything up for you and let you know what the new dangers are. That, and of course, the dangers from around the world. Next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Stay tuned.